Good evening, fellow ruminators. Welcome back to another session, Rumination with Andrew. Thank you so much for joining as we are about to discuss a very important topical matter. And we shall continue with the discussion on the whole debate about Mark Golding's, what should I say now, his qualification, his ability to do his job based on his ethnic background and on his nationality. We know that Mark Golding has declared, has confirmed that he is in fact a dual citizen of Great Britain and Jamaica, and the debate continues, and the debate is rather heated and is getting hotter and hotter every day, and people are still continuing to not yield. They're actually suggesting that, we need Mark Golding to go, because Mark Golding is not an authentic or quintessential Jamaican. And that is the question. Who is a quintessential Jamaican, right? Who do we regard as a Jamaican? What comprises a Jamaican, right? And this is something that we have to understand. Jamaicans like to boast that we are out of many one people, and that we practice pluralism in Jamaica. And that is in theory largely and not in practice, because we do have racism on both sides of the coin, right? We have where we have seen, if you go to boardrooms, for example, in the executive boardrooms at these very elite institutions in Jamaica, you'll find that many of these board executive directors are not persons of my complexion. They're not persons of my hue, right? Most of them look more like the master class, right? The slave master class that used to wield power in Jamaica during the days of slavery and colonialism. That's the reality of Jamaica. And this is something that we need to be discussing rather than attacking one man. I think we tend to want to attack one person as attacking the system, right? We need to look closely at the Jamaican system in terms of hierarchies of power, the power structure, the power system that is deeply embedded and entrenched in the Jamaican culture. And then we can see how we can propose solutions, recommendations to solving some of these intractable problems. But we tend sometimes to want to address our problems going the easy route, right? Walking down the easy path, and oftentimes that is not going to solve the problems, the racial, the class problems, because we have deep class tensions in Jamaica, and we have to deal with these situations. What is happening to Mark Golding right now is not something that is only meant for him, right? It's directed to the planter class, right? The descendants, I should say, of the planter class, right? Because they have inherited, for the most part, the wealth and the privilege. Many Jamaicans are, in fact, envious of that, and rightly so. But we have to be able to look at everything, the full picture, and even at some of us who might be Black as I am, who have also inherited this sort of class privilege, right? This sort of class wealth. We've got to be able to delve into these things rather than looking at one person. We've got to attack the system, right? And Jamaica has a deep and has an unfair and unjust system that needs to be uprooted, right? But we have to study the history, and we've got to look at, what contributes to this sort of inequities, the social economic inequities that are evident, that are so palpable in the land of Marcus Mosiah Garvey, right? That is something that we have to look at. But the question we'd like to ask, what comprises a Jamaican? And I think that Professor Rex Netterford, I think he is the best person to answer that question. And I shall look at an article that was written about him, and this was in the BBC, An Appreciation of the Life of Rex Netterford, and it was written by Sir Ronald Sanders, right? And he talks about how an extraordinary intellectual and person this man was, Rex Netterford. And we don't have to talk much about Rex Netterford, because Rex Netterford is a person par excellence, right? He is a person extraordinaire. We know that there's no words that we can think about. This guy was a man who walked with kings and queens, right? And a man who exhibited an aura of scholarship and who believed in his, in himself, and believed that he is equally endowed with talents and gifts like any other being, regardless of the fact that he might have emerged from the lower stratum of the Jamaican society. But he elevated himself because of his unwavering ambition. Right now, let's go now to and determination, I should say. Now, let's look at the aspects of what he says, because this was a very classic quote from Rex Netterford. So he says that Netterford was a Jamaican, but he was Caribbean too. As he said, and he's quoting Rex Netterford here, he says, and I quote, "The typical West Indian," and I shall also put there Jamaican, "is part African, part European, part Asian, part Native American, but totally Caribbean." And I'm going to repeat this by putting in Jamaican. Instead of using the word West Indian, I'll use the word Jamaican, right? Based on what Netterford is saying here, I would argue that the typical Jamaican is part African, part European, part Asian, part Native American, but totally Jamaican, quintessentially Jamaican, right? And that is what we have to understand, all right? So when we look at a person like Mark Golding, he is what? Part what? African, he's part European, he's part Asian, and he's what? Quintessentially, typically Jamaican, right? That is what we have to understand. And all the people who live there, from the blackest, right, of persons like myself to the lily white person, we can say that our culture is emerging, a coming together of many different ethnic groups, and we have formed a culture that we can be proud of called the Jamaican culture. And that is not only for Jamaicans, it's for all of us in the Americas. And, Rex Netterford was very proud when he said people like of European heritage who would like to say to him in the Americas that they have influenced Africans. He says to them, well, so have Africans. You have African blood, you have African cultural, mixing and dynamics running through your veins, right? And the same thing goes for Black people, that we also have some European elements and dynamics running through our brains, not our veins, not brains, but veins, right? So we have to understand that that is what we are. That is who we are as a people. We cannot, at this juncture of the history, think that we are just Africans, right? Yes, some of us might have more African DNA than some, all right? Or the potency of the African DNA might be stronger, right? And might be more dominant than others. But it's a culture, right, that shapes us, the culture and the language, right, that shape us. And when you look at a person like Mark Golding, you know that he has Jamaican sensibilities because he was born there. And I'm not taking up for Mark Golding, right? If we were to have a discussion now in terms of how did Mark Golding, accumulate his wealth, then I would say let the investigators do their work. But we can't attack one person. We have to look at also how did PJ Patterson get his wealth? How did Andrew Holness get his wealth, etc., etc., etc.? Right? We've got to look at these, we've got to be a fair people. We can't, be arbitrary in the way how we do things. Now, this morning, the Gleaner had an editorial which was very good. And in that editorial, the editor of the Gleaner highlighted that different countries have different laws that govern people's eligibility to sit in Parliament or in Congress. And of course, our Jamaican Constitution permits, right, any member, even if they have dual citizenship, to sit in Jamaican Parliament, right? If they are a member of any of the Commonwealth countries. And that is the law. Now, is that fair? You and I should say we need to have a debate on that. And our legal scholars need to come together and they need to put together something that, that represents the pulse of the nation, how Jamaicans feel about that situation. The problem is that we have not been educated about our constitution. And because we are so ignorant, because we lack the knowledge, then we tend to just go with the flow. We tend to be so partisan that people are saying, I don't care what the law says. That is what somebody says today on one of my videos, one of the commentators on my videos, that, she doesn't care about the Constitution, the law. The Constitution, ladies and gentlemen, is the supreme law of the land. I repeat that. Ladies and gentlemen, the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and we've got to respect it. Now, yes, if we are educated about it, there might be elements of the Constitution, there might be clauses therein that we need to alter, that we need to tweak, but we cannot arbitrarily, as the Gleaner suggested, attack somebody and say that this rule applies to that person and another rule applies to the other. We've got to be consistent in the interpretation of our laws. At this juncture, Mark Golding is a British, he has dual citizenship, he's a British citizen and he's also a Jamaican citizen. And he's a citizen by descent. He's a British citizen, I should say, by descent, by his father's descent. He cannot renounce his father's descent, who his father is. His father was British, and his father chose to have lived in Jamaica. I understand that he moved there in 1965 or 1963, thereabout, right? And his father was a surgeon, an orthopedic, I understand, surgeon in Jamaica. Now, he chose to have lived in Jamaica. He had his children there, right? And Mark Golding grew up in Jamaica and has Jamaican cultural sensibilities, right? Jamaican cultural identities. I'm sure he likes his patties and he likes whatever most Jamaicans like, right? He loves that because he is immersed. He's a part of our culture. We tend to be hypocrites as Jamaicans when we are attacked mostly by foreigners and people say, wow, Jamaica is only a black country and they don't have any whites there or they don't have any other ethnic groups there. Many Jamaicans tend to be offended and, oh, Jamaica is a nationality, it's not a race, right? And we defend the people who are white and we show even Mark Golding's face, right? And all these other people who we deem to be white, right? We show their faces on the internet and say that they're Jamaican and they're white or they're Asian or they're whatever, right? Because we want to defend that we are out of many one. At the same time, when it suits us, we don't like it, right? So right now, those who are political enemies of Mark Golding, because you don't like the fact that he is the leader of the opposition, then you are going to attack him. You're going to attack his race, you're going to attack his ethnic background, you're going to attack his father's nationality, right? Because his father was British and he can't change that, right? And his father gave him, logically, many Jamaicans who have gone abroad, let us say that they've had children in the United States, right? They would like their children to be dual citizens, I should say, right? To have dual citizenship, right? They would definitely like to have their children, be endowed with that sense of being dual citizens, right? Because that is what it's about, right? To broaden their horizon and to give them as many opportunities as they can. One of the things that we need to be aware of is that, unfortunately, Jamaica has never been a settler nation. And it's something that we have to come to grips with, right? The Barbados was a settler nation where the whites, lived there and still live there, right? But even our politicians sometimes, they send their children abroad, right? They use what should I say now, the opportunities available in Jamaica and they send their children abroad and sometimes live there. We have to be thankful to some extent that Mark Golding made Jamaica his home, right? Because he too could have gone anywhere he wanted to have gone, right? He could have gone to the United States, he could have gone to Great Britain, he could have gone to Canada, and he could have settled there, right? And he could have been using his talent there, right? So we cannot continue now to attack people, particularly when we are limited right now in terms of talents, because many people are leaving. 80% of university graduates leave Jamaica per year, right? 80% of our university graduates immigrate, right? And they leave the country of their birth called Jamaica, right? We need to come to grips with that reality. Now, if that is happening every year, what is the future for Jamaica? And why are we attacking people like Mark Golding, who could perhaps, as I've suggested, left and could have immigrated and could have gone to other countries? Right? But what you like, for the most part, many of you down there, is this sort of Butu ghetto country, right? So anything goes, and you can have people coming from the lowest common denominator to be your prime minister and so on, right? I think that's what you really want. And I think that is what, to a large extent, Jamaicans deserve, right? You have become this dance hall ghetto culture right now that, people like Mark Golding is like a rare commodity. He speaks too well. And he's even struggling because he has to try to, pander to the base in his speech when he should not be doing that at this level, at the 21st century. We should not be pandering to the base, right? Or people should have been that educated, because it's not that he has a British accent, right? It's that he speaks standard Jamaican English, right? But you think he's a white man, he's not going to be loyal to Jamaica. One of the things that you need to understand, and I want to pull up an expression here or a statement used in an article that was written by Martin Henry, right, some years ago in 2009. And this article was titled "The Brown Man Wins," right? The brown man wins. Now, this is what Martin Henry is saying. Let me just make my screen here larger. He says here, where am I now? Yes, he says here, the running psychological significance of color in Jamaica is as much a condition of the darker shades being constantly and contentiously on the color defensive. All right, so we are on this color defensive. Jamaica has this color, what should I say now, ego. And we have to be careful as the lighter shades on the color continuum, rather, projecting superiority. So let me repeat that. The running psychological significance of color in Jamaica is as much a condition of the darker shades being constantly and contentiously on the color defensive as the lighter shades on the color continuum projecting superiority, which is true. And reverse racism, which exists in Jamaica, because what we're seeing against the attitude against Mark Golding is actually reverse racism. And reverse racism is apparently quite acceptable as compensation for wrongs suffered in the past, right? So we are going to attack any person of Mark Golding's hue because we think that by doing that, we are getting some form of justice, and that is ridiculous. That is ridiculous. We can't just look at the man because of his father's heritage, right? Or because of his perceived color, right? We have to look at the man in terms of his ability to do the job. If he cannot do the job, then yes, I'm the first one to hold my hand up and say he should demit office. But you have to show evidence that Mark Golding does not qualify for the job. And the Constitution qualifies him at this juncture of the history for the job. Until we change the Constitution, then we can't attack his national standing, his dual citizenship standing. We can't. And stop telling me about what you call it now, integrity, right? Because Jamaicans are not people of integrity, right? Many of us who are crying and we're screaming the word integrity, we don't have any form of integrity. When it comes on to Noise Abasement Act, and then we come to, people are shouting and having loud music down there, right? You're not people of integrity. When you are depriving people of their sleep, when you're killing people left, right, and center, you are not people of integrity. The corruption that is in Jamaica, right? And it's not only among politicians, it's among our people. And you're telling me, you are calling people and you are suggesting that you are people of it, you are standing up for integrity. Yes, one thing if you are standing up for integrity because you are a person of integrity, but many Jamaicans are not people of integrity, right? So you can't cast any stones because you and I are as guilty as Mark Golding if you deem him to be a man who lacks integrity. Who are you to say that? Have you evidence that Mark Golding is not a person of integrity? You've got to have evidence. And I could point to many politicians on both sides of the aisle who I could describe as people who lack integrity. Right? So I don't want to hear this sort of, moral, you're hoisting yourself up on this moral, what should I say now? Pedestal, as if you are God and you can determine who is morally upright and who lacks morality. When you can't. Because the society is a messy society as we see it right now. Right? Now, there is another statement that I would like to read to you from, in 2000, was it 2019 when Damon Crawford was up against Anne-Marie Vance, right? And there were spatterings of also, racial, heritage and who is white and who belongs to Massa and the colonial sort of, master. Now, so we have here in the statements, Crawford cited the contest as being between a candidate with a beautiful face. That is what Crawford was saying, presumably Vaz, and one with a beautiful mind. All right, so here we have, let me look at this. Here we have Vaz's wife, Anne-Marie Vaz, who Jamaicans would think, is white, which she perhaps is not. But, she's perhaps more mixed than she, because many Jamaicans, we really don't have any white people in Jamaica for the most part, right? So we don't, right? Most of these people are mixed, right? And they have African blood and have African heritage in their veins, right? If we want to speak the truth. They might look lily white, and I'm not suggesting that people who have immigrated in recent times. You might have people who have just come from Europe and they have had no, but for the most part, those of us who have been living there for years, at least before independence, well, I should, are mixed, right? We are mixed. So we've got to stop shouting about white and black and dividing people. As I told you to, I think in a previous video, even in the United States, in the South, there was this geneticist, British geneticist, who went to the United States and lived there for years. And he did his research in the South. And he says that 90% of the people that we would call whites in the southern part of the United States, okay, they have black blood, right? They do have black DNA, African DNA, even though they might look lily white, according to you and your standards, right? So we have to be careful of applying North American inferior understanding of what race is and all of that, and to define yourselves. And that's what exactly you're using to define Mark Golding, right? Even though we like to boast, as it were, that we are out of many one people, but we are not one people. That's why we're killing each other as the days go by. Now, this is interesting because, again, we see here where there on RGR website, we see where Crawford under fire for comments about opponents' class and color, because class and color always comes up in Jamaica, right? So I think that Martin Henry, again, was weighing in on what was happening. And these are the words of Martin Henry. That was from 2019. This is on the RGR website. Let me see the date. On March 4, 2019, just before he died. I think perhaps some days or a month before he died. Political commentator Martin Henry has described the comments as an act of desperation and a tactic used from time to time by politicians. He said it is time for Jamaica's politics to go beyond race and class. Listen to what Martin Henry is saying, and I quote, in the Jamaica that we know and we want to build in that particular direction, all citizens should be available for political office. I am going to repeat that. And I wish Martin Henry was here today to weigh in on what is happening with the Mark Golding's dual citizenship debate. I think that he will be sticking to the Constitution because he was a constitutional expert in his own right, right? He wasn't a lawyer, but he was well versed in the Constitution. Let me repeat what Martin Henry says, or said at the time. In the Jamaica that we know and we want to build in that particular direction, all citizens should be available for political office. All citizens. And Mark Golding is a citizen. All citizens should be able to make their voices heard. And I don't think Anne-Marie Vaz's color or class should be a deciding factor. We perhaps are forgetting that for the first decades of party politics, we were led by white Jamaicans, or very near white Jamaicans that the people literally adore, right? That the people literally adore. So at the time, we were led, as he's suggesting, as Martin Henry is suggesting, by white Jamaicans or near white Jamaicans, right? And particularly if they're British, we would be, wow, we're enamored by them, right? And you know, one of the strange things about Jamaican, or Jamaicans, I should say, if you should have a British person go to Jamaica tomorrow and desire and with his British accent, right? He's white and he's British and perhaps a famous British person. And, you know, I would not be shocked if we would not want him to be, if he wanted to walk in Parliament and say he wants to run Jamaica. I don't know if we would not be happy because some of the things we see there in Jamaica that the Americans, particularly white Americans, get away with, and the way how we treat our own people, you really, really wonder. And then we're looking at Mark Golding and we're talking about his nationality, the fact that his father was British, and he inherited that his father's heritage, his father's birth right. Okay, he has a right to be a British citizen, right? And the Constitution, whether it's good or bad, I am not going to say that it is, right? Because I understand the other side, that we can't have these privileged people always there and, you know, running the show, right? But at the given moment, the Jamaican Constitution allows dual citizens who are members of any of the Commonwealth countries to occupy positions in Parliament, right? That is what the Jamaican Constitution suggests. And we've got to respect the Constitution. Now, we can have a debate. What we should be doing now, we should have a debate about the Constitution. First, we cite the clauses of the Constitution, and then we have a debate. And then we can see how we can tweak it to suit the interests of our citizens, right? But if this is going to just be about party politics and who is Jamaican, and we need also to come to grips with who or what is a Jamaican. What comprises a Jamaican? What makes Jamaica a Jamaican? Because you speak patois and because you are dark-skinned, does that mean? Because that is the what we call it now, the subjective understanding. This is a subjective understanding of who a Jamaican really is abroad. That's what people think, that we are largely not very intelligent people. We can't speak, even among the Caribbean nations. They have that about us, that we can't speak English, right? And the Americans or some of these Europeans that we're on their Black society. You can't be light-skinned because light-skinned is not Jamaican. You have to be very dark to be Jamaican. right? That is the sort of subjective understanding, right? Now, is that the sort of impression we want to send to the world? Yeah? We have to be careful of what we are doing and don't allow party politics to blind your eyes. Mark Golding, as it stands, as the Jamaican Constitution allows him, unless there are other things that we are not aware of. And I'm suggesting to you that I understand that Mark Golding might have been involved in what happened during the FinSat years, and that is what you should be taking up, bones, and you should really try to find out what role he played in the FinSat debacle. That I would understand, but you wouldn't also should be able to arbitrarily attack him. There are other participants, there are other actors in that FinSat debacle, right? So what is this thing? What is this? I don't understand what's going on in Jamaica about, all of this energy is about Mark Golding and his Jamaicanness, right? And if you think that somebody is going to betray you just because he has dual citizenship, you're stupid. I'm sorry, right? Because a lot of your people down there, the Black people, those who just have Jamaican passports, are betraying in Parliament, even as we speak. The economic agreements that they ink out and they sign off to, a lot of times they betray you. Look at the corruption in Jamaica. Look at Royal Reed, for example, and what he did when he was in the education sector. That was an act of betrayal also. And lots of them have betrayed us, and that is why we are economically and socially backward, because we have been betrayed by our politicians, and politicians who look Jamaican, that you think, this subjective understanding, right, of what Jamaica or Jamaicans look like, right? They have not really stood up for you. And we need also now to look at our elites. Who are these elites? Because they're behind the scenes running the show. And I can tell you, they do not look, the Jamaican elites, for the most part, do not look like 98% of the population, right? The Jamaican elites, I can assure you, do not look like 98% of the population. Why don't you talk about that? Why don't you Jamaicans attack that? Why are you attacking one man? That he perhaps is a part of that elite structure, but you need to attack the system. You need to look at the system as a whole and stop looking at one man. Because if Mark Golding leaves office tomorrow, if he decides that he's not going to renounce his British citizenship and he's going to leave office, you are not going to win. He wins. At the end of the day, he wins, because the people whom he represents, the class that he represents, they're the ones running the show, and they look like him. And some of them are lighter than he is, and some of them are more standoffish than he is, right? So we have to look at the system, and these people, these Jamaican elites, are the ones who control the Andrew Holnesses and the Mark Goldings. They're the ones who are calling the shots, right? And they're the ones who are behind the crafting of laws that are going to be against you, the normal, ordinary Black Jamaican, right? And many of you don't want to listen. And that is what pains my heart. You don't want to listen to truth. Truth to you is nonsense. But the people there who are talking every day on, and you're liking and you're subscribing, and they have hundreds and thousands of subscribers, at the end of the day, they're not educating you, they're entertaining you, and you love to be entertained. And when you wake up from your entertainment, you are going to see that the Jamaica that you think you live in, the Jamaica that you think you own, that you don't own, that others of Mark Golding's ilk and those who look like him own, you are going to understand that you have been fast asleep. You have been fast asleep, and it's time for you to wake up. It's time for you to wake up and do an investigation for yourself, an individual investigation of looking into these boardrooms and see who are these people, right? These people are not people who look like the average Jamaican, right? And these are the discussions that we should be having, even with Mark Gordon, and ask him, what would you do if you get to be prime minister, if you get to become prime minister tomorrow, to bridge the gap between the rich and the poor? We should heckle him, grill him, until he's able to give us some pragmatic solutions to solve these problems. And again, we can't blame him for all of these problems, because at the end of the day, he wasn't in politics for many years. Even though because of the economic policies, he might have been behind the scenes, as we saw with, his alleged involvement, as it were, in the FinSac debacle. I'm not saying he was, but the fact of the matter, that's what the allegations are. And these are things that we should be looking into. And the JLP, the Jamaican Labour Party, should be called out, because they said that the moment they got into office from 2007, they would have done their investigation on FinSac and would have tabled the findings. And they still have not done that, which suggests to me, based on what I have read, that both parties were involved. Even though the party was the PNP was the main actor, but behind the scenes, the JLP and their politicians were also involved, right? They were involved in that grand catastrophe, right? And that was a time when our Jamaican economy was ravaged, and it has never returned. And that country is just year after year being impoverished and getting poorer and poorer every day. And they're telling us all of these, delusional assertions from the IMF, that we're growing and our economy is on the right path and we're lowering our debt and all of this nonsense, right? And we find that our standard of living is deteriorating every day, right? So it's time for us to wake up. It's not now time for us just to knock one man because of his color and because of his dual citizenship, right? It's time for us to look at the bigger picture and see that the system that the British left, this plantation model, has remained intact. It has remained intact. And it seems to me that the order was that it should not have been adjusted, right? It should not have been adjusted. That's why you go to Jamaica every year and the same thing, nothing changes really. You see two highways here and there, but in Jamaica, the more things change, they continue to be the same, because that is what slavery was about, just to keep the plantation going. And Jamaica is, in fact, I'm not trying to make a joke. I'm not trying to be metaphorical in my description of Jamaica. It is a literal plantation. It is a literal plantation. And it's time for us now to change that model and become a modern Jamaican. But we have to do it together. And we have to work together as a people of all cultures and ethnicities and nationalities. Once they become Jamaican and they want to prosper in Jamaica and they want to build that country, we should allow them and stop limiting ourselves to some, narrow understanding of who we consider to be an authentic Jamaican. Thank you so much for joining. I hope that you will like and you'll share and you'll subscribe. Remember that you have to like the videos, right? You are not liking the videos enough, and the videos have to be liked. So before you even end the video, before you move on to another video, right? Be sure to like the video. And if you have not yet subscribed, of course, I'd appreciate if you hit the subscribe button that you'll see on the lower corner to your right. All right. Thank you so much. All the best to you. Adios.